Welcome to Knife Thoughts. This video is going to be on these two knives, and these are both the Loosahatchie Jack from RoseCraft Blades. So these were sent to me by RoseCraft Blades to check out, and I have been carrying this one, and there's really two different versions here. So this is the red wood or red sandalwood version, and this is the yellow sandalwood version. So same knife, just different cover materials, but only slightly different in that they are red sandalwood versus yellow sandalwood. And so this Loosahatchie Jack is named after a river in Tennessee, like, the names of some of the other RoseCraft Blades knives. They have connections to Tennessee and the area there where the designer, Andy Armstrong, is from. And, I appreciate that because I think it, gives them that kind of callback to their place of design, their place of not necessarily where they're manufactured, but origin in their design, and kind of the history of traditional pocket knives. So these do look very, very traditional. That's one thing that I really like about these RoseCraft Blades traditional knives. They do have modern, style knives also, but their traditional knives are very traditional looking. So while they are made, using modern machinery and such, they're made overseas, they are very much in the style of traditional pocket knives. So for example, they are pinned construction. There's no screws here. Not only that, but these have flush pins on the covers, which I appreciate. GEC knives tend to not have that, and it is something I do think I prefer the look of the flush pins. They have, a classic back spring, two-hand opening, non-locking, but at the same time, they have some features of modern knives, like they have a stop pin, which I really appreciate. If you have watched my videos for a while, it seems like people, if there's one thing that people know about me from watching my channel, it's that I hate blade wrap and proud tips. And that's very true. And this, these have stop pins, so that helps stop blade wrap. And then they also have D2 steel. And so D2 steel, I think, is a great option for traditional pocket knives. And the reason for that is because it's not technically a stainless steel, so you can kind of have the historical feel of a non-stainless, a carbon steel. And it will, maybe patina some. In my experience, not a whole lot, but it will rust if you just let water on it. But at the same time, it is honestly, at least for me, stainless enough for daily use. I have used D2 steel knives fishing, hunting, pretty much the gamut of normal uses, non-tactical type uses, and D2 works great for me. So I really like D2 steel, and I think it's a great compromise for people who want a carbon steel in their traditional pocket knives, but you still get that corrosion resistance and honestly good edge holding too. I didn't use this one as much as I have used some of their other knives, but the edge holding is good. Everybody pretty much has D2 figured out at this point, and can heat treat it to a reasonable, usable edge and edge holding, edge stability. I personally like D2 actually quite a bit. I find that I'm familiar with it. It's easy to sharpen with my setup, which is basically just some diamond stones and a Spyderco double stuff. So I am a fan of D2. Sometimes people kind of poo-poo it, especially on Reddit for some reason, but I personally like it. So I like that choice also for, being that these are traditional knives, but made, with some modern upgrades, I guess I should say. Now this is a very classic jack knife. It's basically just that. It's a regular jack. And so that means it has, a rounded butt here. It has a bolster at the pivot end, but no end cap. So classic jack. It does have a squared end. It's not a rounded end. I'm going to show you a comparison to a GEC knife that I think is kind of the closest comparison, but the GEC knife has a rounded end. And it has a clip point blade. Now this clip point is kind of interesting to me. I actually have seen some vintage knives with this type of clip point, but it's not something that you see on GEC knives or Jack Wolf knives. It's different than their clip points. And that's because it has this really straight spine and then just a really straight clip. So there's no swoop to the clip. It's just straight. And so you get this kind of tall corner here. There's a drawn swedge, which is a nice drawn swedge. I do like the look of that. And, you know, you get a relatively tall blade because of that. So it's, you know, you get a good amount of space here between the spine and the edge. So it is ground nicely also. They do a good job of these. Hopefully you can see it. It's kind of hard to see, but it comes to a nice thin, you know, thickness behind the edge. I don't use calipers. It's just not the style of video that I do. But for me, it cut really nicely. I used this on some tomatoes for my son, and you know, it's always when you're cutting tomatoes and onions and stuff like that, you can kind of tell how well a knife slices, and it did well. But it's ground nicely and has this kind of interesting but not non-traditional clip point. It's just not necessarily the type of clip point that you see a lot right now. Now this has a long pull, as you can see. And the long pull does work. Now, one thing I would kind of like to see a little bit more of a kind of, I don't even know, lip, like a harder lip on the long pull. So it's a little bit more rounded there than I think would be ideal. But that's not to say that you can't use it easily. So when you're using this long pull, you can, you know, kind of just pinch between your thumbnail and your, really, I think a lot of times it's going to be your index finger and or your middle finger there on the back. And I never really, well, maybe one time or two times my thumbnail slipped off, but it's not, you know, I don't think it's an issue. And then the other thing is that you can pinch it. So I prefer pinchable blades. Particularly, I prefer single blades and pinchable blades, but it is pinchable. So pinch, pull it open, and that is with or despite, however you want to say it, the pretty strong pull. So I would call this maybe a 7, 6 to 7, definitely not a 5, closer to 7 than 6, I would say. I'm going to call it a solid 7. So it's a 7 pull, and that's true for both of them. Pretty strong pulls on these, which a lot of people love. I do, you know, like strong pulls. I don't hate weaker pulls as much as some people do, but I think it's a good choice because it makes it feel, you know, quality. So classic jackknife, you know, you get a lot of those traditional looking features like the pins. Oh, I wanted to mention also here the shield. So this, they call this the RoseBud Shield, and I didn't realize that for a little while, but it does look like a closed rosebud. So, you know, it's not, didn't open, but it does look like a closed rosebud. So I appreciate that. They use that on some of their other knives here, like the Nolichucky also. So I do like a shield. That shield, I don't believe is pinned. I believe that it is just glued in there, but you know, it's actually fitted really nicely. There's no gaps around it and no gaps there. I hope I'm not gonna make this video and then realize that it's actually an integral shield. I wouldn't imagine that it is. I didn't see that. I had looked at the product page on RoseCraft before doing this video here, just to kind of refresh myself, particularly on the wood names, but I didn't see anything about that, so I'm assuming it's just glued in there and not like an integral shield. But it would be amazing if it was for this price, which, speaking of, I might as well talk about that now. These are both just under $60, so like $59. You can get them from Traditional Pocket Knives. I want to thank Austin for, you know, allowing me to be an affiliate and helping, you know, get me in contact with RoseCraft. I actually had met Andy at Blade Show in 2023 and kind of discussed them, but you can get these at Traditional Pocket Knives, and you can also get them at RoseCraft Blades. There'll be links in the description for both of those places, so make sure you check them out. But the two different versions is another thing I want to talk about here. So this is the red sandalwood version, and this is the one that I've carried because, man, I was just blown away by the grain on this. So on the front here, you've got this really almost, I would call it like a burl looking type grain. So you can see there's all these different swirls, you know, even some kind of almost little knots, just a beautiful, beautiful grain. I was really, really impressed by the grain on this knife in particular. And then on the back here, interestingly, it's kind of more of a straight, it's like curly but straight grain, but a very tight grain also. So really, really beautiful grain on this one, and I have been enjoying the look of it. I actually made a post on a Wooden Wednesday here recently with this lynch leather slip that's kind of a deep maroon that goes really well with this. This does have a reddish look in, you know, in bright sunlight basically. So this is the red sandalwood version, and then there's also yellow sandalwood. And so you can see the difference. This one, the yellow is lighter. It is more yellow, you know. And the other thing that I've noticed between mine, the grain is a little bigger on the yellow and a little straighter. Now the grain's pretty straight on the back of my red, but from pictures I've seen online of these, I think that generally it's a little bit straighter of a grain, and again, lighter of a color of the wood on this yellow. So it's just a personal choice. There's no different in price, and I think, you know, just go with whichever one calls to you more. I think that they're both great, and, you know, have a really nice look to them. Very traditional look. I mean, this one, the dark and light together here, I think looks great too. Now, one thing about this one, I don't know if this is because I have carried and used it and it's probably gotten kind of sweaty and stuff. There's a little bit of shrinkage. I don't think that it came with this here. And that's something that you see on traditional knives. I've actually had that happen on like 3 or maybe 4 GEC knives in the past year. So, you know, those are more expensive and, you know, made in the USA and all of that, and they still have some shrinkage issues on certain types of wood. Now, do I know or think that this will be across all of these knives? Probably not. It's hard to tell, but it is something that I wanted to mention. You know, a little bit of shrinkage. If you got the GEC number 47 Vipers in ebony recently, they seem to all have this, where the covers shrink a little bit and then you can catch your thumbnail on the liner. So mine does have that here. I don't know that it has it on any of the other areas. Maybe, yeah, slightly right here, but mostly right here. But other than that, the fitment is great. It fits great between the covers and the bolsters, you know, other than this right here, which is something that, you know, I've seen a lot of issues on GECs recently. No gaps on the back spring, really nicely done there. Again, you know, really nice action. The tip sits nice and deep. I don't know if I mentioned that while I was talking about the stop pin earlier, but the tip sits nice and deep, which I appreciate. It is well centered, maybe like ever so slightly off to this side, but well centered. It's not going to touch the liners at all. So a beautifully made knife, and that's really what I think with these knives. Not only are they traditional looking, so it's not like a lot of modern knives where they have a modern look to them, you know, modern slip joints, which I don't mind. You know, I love my Jack Wolf knives, but these have a very traditional look while still being, you know, having that modern manufacture and being relatively inexpensive at, again, under $60 each for these. So I'm going to show you a couple comparisons. So here are 2 RoseCraft blades. So we've got the Nolichucky and the Beaver Creek. So you can see that the Loosahatchie is kind of between the two, but closer to the Beaver Creek. And then I wanted to show you the Jack Wolf knives, Big Bro and Little Bro. So again, the Loosahatchie is going to be between these two here. And then also 2 GEC knives. Here is a GEC number 15 and a GEC number 86, same deal. The Loosahatchie is between those two. I can actually see on the video there must be a little bit of shrinkage here too. I didn't notice that just looking at it, but you can kind of see where those liners are sticking out. But again, between the 15 and the 86 from GEC. And then I was going to mention that the 78, that's the one that has the rounded top bolster. I think the Loosahatchie feels pretty similar to the 78 in its size. So that's that. If you're familiar with the GEC number 78, then the Loosahatchie is going to be a familiar size to you. But I have enjoyed getting to check out and carry these knives, particularly this one that I've carried more. So I really appreciate RoseCraft Andy sending them along. And again, if you want to get one of these, make sure you get it at Traditional Pocket Knives. I have a discount code there, so make sure you check that out in the description and use my link there or at RoseCraft. And if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, leave any comments below, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and select all so you know when I post new videos. I have more RoseCraft Blades videos coming. Go to my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife related topics, and make sure you subscribe via email there. That's the best way to get all of my content. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.